So hello, my name's Rachel Shields from Knowing in Nature, and we're in a beautiful spot today. I always like meeting people, everyday people, and learning through their lens of knowing in nature and how each person can express how they connect, how they understand, as an everyday thing, like every other day, how we're connecting with nature and how we have that communication going on. So I'm here with a really, really cool person that I've met on my travels, and we're just going to have a yarn, have a chat. We've got a cup of tea each, and we're in a spot that's meaningful. And I always love people to just speak for themselves, say who you are, where you're from. There's one speaking for themselves.
Yeah, no, so yeah, thanks for inviting me to share this wee spot. So yeah, I'm Sapphire, and this is a spot on the Merry Creek, which it's one of the oldest patches of restoration on this little bit of the creek. And this is Wurundjeri land.
We're in Wurundjeri country.
Yeah, so just up the way there is actually a proper grassland remnant, which is just glorious. But I come to this spot, this old patch of restoration, because these glorious acacia trees just sit, and the wisdom of the trees just help me think. So I come here when I'm feeling overwhelmed and just sit, drink tea, and enjoy the fact that we are slowly starting to get the creek back to some sort of health, and we're on the edge of a grassland, which now stretches not very far out to Melbourne, but we're on the edge of this basalt plain, and these big basalt rocks have been here, and they're even here longer than, these are little remnants of trees that have come back, but this basalt just sits and sits. And yeah, so I just love this spot to think and accept the things I can't change, and keep working on the things I can.
Yeah. So you're saying that, so on the other side of the camera here is a little creek system called the Merry Creek, and so Sapphire is aware of the revegetation that's occurring here. What's the actual importance of having healthy creek, and how does revegetation play a part in that?
Yeah, our riparian system, so our rivers, our creeks, our wetlands, they are the lifeblood of the land. Like it's like the filter, so it really is, I guess it's a cross between, if you're going for a body analogy, the air in our lungs, we absorb that, but it also acts like our liver. It cleans and filters that toxicity, and there are all sorts of amazing organisms that help filter out what comes down. And so yeah, we need these, so you were on the edge of a grassland, and as you come into the creek, this is where that heart's blood is. The trees, the reeds and the animals and the fungi that basically break down all of that nutrient that gets trapped. So when there's floods, you get this burst of organic matter, and then that holds and starts to be broken down and is food for invertebrates and food for invertebrates. So all the little insects are then food for the birds and the ducks and the fish and the eels. The eels come from the ocean. And so, yeah, if we were to just pick one area that we could restore, and I want us to restore everything, but if we wanted to pick an area to restore that maximised connectivity across the landscape, always pick your water systems, because they literally go from the top of the system all the way down with gravity. And if that is healthy ecology, all of the organisms there doing their jobs and connected, they will reconnect out to all of the other kinds of land system, and that will be the strongest restoration we could do, is certainly starting with your systems. And you can see the health improve as the water becomes clear. We're on basalt country here, so when it is raining, the water gets dirty really quickly because of the light clays, but they drop out also quickly, and the water does run clear here quite quickly. So we are starting to have the solutions, and the restoration upstream is also helping, because unfortunately the Paul Mary Creek, particularly this Melbourne bit in this industrial zone that we're on the edge of, this was literally dug and turned into concrete drains. Like, they destroyed beyond the rocks, like they removed all the vegetation, and crazily they tried to make the water move down the system faster, which is the reverse of natural systems. The slowing of systems, the slowing of water, letting it filter in, be cleaned, and then move on. If you've got something rushing, there's no opportunity for life to get involved, and you're just moving your problem downstream, and then it, you know, pours into the ocean full of sediment and covers up all the algae, and it's not what you want.
No, I like how you say there's no opportunity for life to get involved, because as you're speaking, I'm imagining if the heart was pumping full steam ahead 24/7 and the blood was just going pumping around your entire physiology, like at that pace, you know, because if our blood's carrying all the, like, the oxygen and it's also carrying nutrients through the system for all the systems, and then it's unable to actually deliver, I guess it's like being a tourist. You know, you're just taking photos, but there's no real connection there as well. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful, the pace that is required for life to actually get involved.
Yeah, and we need all of the bits of life connected to each other and working together, because that's what, you know, ecology as a word means, is it means house or home, but they're the systems of species that together, you know, make that ecology. And, you know, often ecologies are named by their sort of dominant trees or dominant plant, but they are just sort of the flagships that show us that there's something else there, but there is a myriad of different species that actually make all of those connections, and we're learning, we're getting better at restoring whole systems, but we're still not putting all of the species back. So yeah, I'm a fungi expert, and I can't believe I call myself an expert, because I think everything's important and it's all connected, and it's the connections that is the reason I study. But I've become this fungi expert advocate, because the fungi often work unseen in that network system. And unfortunately with our current restoration efforts, if you're not sort of seen and charismatic, your worth is not recognised. So the power in recycling and breaking down of organic matter and being food for all sorts of smaller microinvertebrates and mesoinvertebrates, that then is food for larger things, which then gets a bit of, you know, maybe a skink will get some attention, or usually, you know, cute furry animals and trees get some attention, and trees sometimes, if they're lucky, get attention. But actually all of the connections are needed. These trees partner with fungi on their roots, and they partner with fungi inside their tissue, which helps with drought tolerance.
Yeah.
So I get really...
How does it help with drought tolerance?
Well, it's we still don't scientifically know, but the logic as I see it is plants have developed these water systems where they can draw water up from the ground, and often that's actually passed to them by their fungi, which are better at getting water out of the micropores. But anyway, they get the water, they draw it up. But if you look at plant cells, they're designed to move, the xylem are the special cells that move water. They're designed to move water in one direction, up the trunk, out the branches and into the veins that we can see on the leaves, and then out, and they transpire it. So trees are fabulous. They breathe, and all plants breathe water out, which then gives the moisture to that system, which is Australia being a huge continent. We actually get most of our moisture, our rain. Some of it comes from the ocean, but a lot of it is actually that breathing out of you know, this vegetation, and it'll cause rain over there. So if you don't have vegetation here, you can't have rain over there. So we've cleared that, but yeah, so the plants can move up and out. That's their kind of breathing.
Beautiful.
But fungi threads are really tiny, and the endophytes and the mycorrhizae on their roots actually slide between the cells. And they're really fine, which is good for hydrostatic pressure. You can actually more efficiently move water in thinner tubes when there's not much water around. So it probably works like the reverse. It's the lymphatic flow system of the plants. It's actually allowing the water to be drawn in a different direction to the plant cells that they've grown and evolved. And plants and fungi came out from the oceans and in the creeks together.
That's funny because you're talking and I've got this wacky question in my imagination and I'm going, do you think that whales know that what you're talking about exists? It just kept popping into my imagination, like, does a whale know that fungi exists?
Well, there are marine fungi, but a lot of the fungi is the terrestrial land system and the freshwater systems. And yet in that early evolution of life, when we were coming from the water-based systems, they were already there together. There was photosynthetic algae or early plants, and they were in the wet patches, and that's where they could photosynthesize. And then that's organic matter, where there were already fungi lineages that could decompose. But at some point, they partnered up, and it's been the earliest system. So some of the very, very old forests that they thought were forests, which we now actually know was prototaxites, was actually large fungal fruit bodies that people, when they first found fossils, thought they were early trees.
Yeah.
And they were actually these mega fungi systems.
Wow.
So they were there, and plants and fungi have been partnering ever since. So plants didn't have to develop a passive, water system, because they already had fungi partners inside their tissues. They're already partnering up. So you don't need to invent something when you already have a solution that's an elegant symbiosis.
Yeah, it's
And
fungi understands the tapestry of life.
Yeah,
And how to relate and where that relation, like that relating, is best to occur. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're literally woven through, but they're such thin threads that only when they pop up fruit bodies do we even realise that they're there, but they're inside the systems doing their thing, just partnering up, doing my job.
And responding.
Yeah. So the people now know that fungi help plants communicate. They actually can pass electrochemical signalling. Yeah, they're inside all of the tissues, not just the roots, but all of the tissues of the plants. So it's one of the things that delights me about the fungi and gives me great hope for restoration.
Yeah.
That when we actually start to put back all of the partners into systems, that it's going to be better. Because my fear is that there's a lot of effort going into seed collection and plant collection, which is super valuable. But unfortunately, because it's coming through a scientific lens, it's often sterilised and tissue culture and isolated, and they're protecting it.
Working in isolation,
And it means that they're probably saving plants and seeds without their partners, which means if you then try and put that back into natural systems, it's like immunocompromised plants. They haven't got their root partners, they haven't got their tissue partners.
Yeah.
And is that going to be strong, healthy, resilient restoration? Maybe not. Hopefully we've started in lots of places and we are building from the remnants out. So hopefully there are little arc fungi that are still in those remnants that can reconnect up and partner up to the new things that we plant around them and try and protect those remnants. But at the moment, I think we're missing huge parts of the jigsaw.
So part of its dreaming is missing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of its story, its song is missing, and then the song it doesn't sound the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plants can't sing on their own.
Some of them probably could, but it's more harmonious when everyone else joins in, right?
Yeah.
It's more of a choir.
Yeah, we want a choir. We want to hear
like-
the songbirds. We want to
Yeah.
hear the chirp of all of the invertebrates. And we want to hear the gentle shush, the mycelium just passing little signals across. And that'll give us, a bigger depth of those connections. And that's what we need to restore, is connected systems.
Exactly. We need to restore connected systems.
Yep, people.
In all ways.
Yeah, we've got to stop this isolation experiment that, science is renowned for, understanding a little fragment and isolating it until we understand that. But biology, life,
Yeah.
Living systems
Yeah.
are the connection of all those little isolated bits. And if you only understand the little isolated bit, you're actually missing the bulk of its existence, which is all those interactions.
Exactly.
And yeah, interactions and connections are what actually make us strong and resilient as people, and landscapes the same.
What motivated your, I mean, I feel like the answer's in the question, but it's always a nice question to ask as part of understanding a person's journey and story, is what motivated you to go that direction of studying mycology?
Mycology? Well, I accidentally studied mycology. So, yeah, I originally thought I was going to be some sort of engineer. I was looking at metallurgy when I finished school. I had a lot of physics and maths behind me, some chemistry, but no, I hadn't done biology since year 10. And I then took a year off and travelled and met people. And yeah, it was the people who were working on the land, farmers and zoologists and botanists and all these people who were sort of working in that environmental system. But this was the 90s, it's a long time ago now. So yeah, I thought, no, I'll go and do geology and biology. I haven't done biology forever.
Yeah.
And so I started in this double degree of a biology and geology. But I got overwhelmed in second year and I thought, I can probably limit myself to planets with life on them, so maybe I can give up the geology. But I still love the geology learning because it helps me read landscape and understanding the rock systems, and there are geological processes that are in such slow time but are important to understand.
Beautiful time, really.
So yeah, that's a base that I've always felt grounded with my geology.
Yeah.
And then I did zoology and botany together, and I was lucky. I studied in a time when mycology was still in botany departments and still taught. So I got 6 weeks in third year of mycology, and it blew my mind. And I came away, yeah, I did a degree, you know, we graduated probably, I don't know, 120 biology students that had all done similar subjects to me, and all the botany students had done this mycology. And I came away going, we've got to get the fungi back in these systems. That's what, you know, somehow it's being dropped out.
Yeah.
And then it continued. We've continued to lose the mycology in the scientific sphere. But luckily, in that same 30 years of loss in the hard sciences, the community have slowly been building up their resources. So that's where I work, is in the community, because they're willing to think about the fungi and think about those connections and see if they are important. And so, yeah, I love working with people who are curious and questioning and observe what they can. So yeah, I tend to work in the macrofungi because we can see them and the community can see them.
Yeah.
And now with the molecular tools, we're actually being able to study fungi we previously couldn't actually even see with a microscope properly because they were too small and we didn't know they were there and we didn't know what they were or what they did. And now those tools are becoming available to citizen scientists as well. So we really can take what we observe and start finding out about these connections properly in the Australian context, because a lot of what we still are learning about mycology comes from other land systems. And so we need to know, like, yeah, biology tends to be the same across the whole planet, but we need to know the stories of our plants and fungi and animals and slime moulds, because the exact story of how they interact and work together, well, that will be Australian.
Well, it's relational to place here.
Yeah, it's why they're adapted to here and not adapted somewhere else.
Exactly, it just seems very obvious, right? Yeah. Tell us about slime mould, because I think if kids hear that, slime mould.
Slime mould.
What's slime mould?
Well, slime moulds we used to think were fungi because they kind of look a bit like fungi when they're producing their spores. So fungi and slime moulds reproduce using spores, which are like seeds but even smaller. But slime moulds, and there are different kinds of slime moulds, so I'm just going to tell you about the slime mould that I see the most, which is one of these slime moulds that, so slime moulds have little amoeba or blob-like stages that go around through all this organic layer and the top layers of soil, and they eat bacteria. So they're actually a population control for all of those bacterial systems that wax and wane as the soil changes. And they're eating and recycling nutrient from bacteria, and the slime moulds themselves get eaten by some things. But yeah, they're kind of like these little blobby things. But they come together, and that's when we see them. So they're like a protoplasm. So they're like this blob where, you get two little happy slime moulds, they start attracting each other, and there must be some sort of pheromone thing that goes on. But they all start to come together, and they look like this big, often bright yellows, oozing mass that if you watch it over time, so there's some great time-lapse photography of these slime moulds, and there's intelligence. They find food, they communicate with each other, they move their resources, and they all come together, and then the ones on the inside basically produce the spores, so they have sex, exchange DNA, and the ones on the outside have made the fruit body of the one. So the one that I see a lot, particularly in restoration where they've used mulch, is called dog vomit slime mould, or Fuligo septica, which is kind of, septic is part of their name, so kind of a bit of a disgusting name. But in the garden where we've had slime moulds, often you'll have a patch of soil that you've started. We had terrible kikuyu, so grass and just monoculture, and it would be really quite hard, so we put lots of cardboard on, so lots of organics, and the worms would start to come in, but you still plant into it and nothing would really grow very well. But one winter we had this slime mould that just went berserk, so we had this hugest plasmodium and all of these spores, and then from spring there onwards, where that slime mould had fruited, the seeds started popping up in the garden, things that we'd let seed, so parsley and calendula, and this was a little veggie patch. But like it was kind of almost sterile until the slime mould had somehow done its thing, and that was the thing, the trigger point to really say, no, this is now soil, this is full of life, and we can grow you seeds, we can get you going.
Yeah, they're carrying information that sounds like it activates information in the other, and that's what you're talking about. Seed collecting is one thing, but to have that relational
where it's going to land has to be a living biology. So some people say there's a difference between dirt and soil, and dirt is sort of inert, the geology and the chemistry, whereas soil is full of life. And there are sort of more things alive in a teaspoon of soil than people alive on the planet, or some ridiculous statistic like that. But yeah, there are so many archaea and bacteria and protozoa and protostins and slime moulds, all the different kinds of slime moulds, and then all of the little greeblies that eat them, and then the bigger greeblies that eat them. And then it gets bigger and bigger, and then you've got earthworms and stuff we can see, and beetles and flies, and then the birds come in and go, oh look, lunch.
So living systems.
So we want soil, we want good living system with all of that carbon recycling. It's the same story as water. If you try and just put, monocultured food down, all the same stuff in the same size, a couple of things can live and absorb it. But if you have different bits of debris and different sizes, you've got all the different organisms that are needed to break that down.
Like you're saying, when the branches fall over, and just allowing that to remain in that part of the system. I do use mulch sometimes, but if I can let, I've got a phrase from a friend, Fran, and she says, let standing stags stand and logs lie. Which means, that woody matter, if it's safe, leave it be. There are a myriad of things that will live in it and become that decay process. And standing wood has different decay organisms to lying dead wood, because lying dead wood gets wetter, often decomposes faster. But some organisms have very long life cycles. So if we're always kind of trying to be fast, we've then only got the species that can cope at that rate. And our landscape were slow pulses. So maybe in La Nina years there was fast decomp, but when there was droughts and slow times and not much rain, everything just chips away and ticks away and supports each other and survives. And that's a totally different speed to, whoosh, all the water, all the rain, all the decomp, which those pulses are fabulous and often are the restoration events.
You know, when our river red gums can finally get enough seeds down that they don't get munched by everything, that they can start to put up some big trees. But maybe there's only 2 or 3 of those restoration events, you know, every couple of centuries.
Yeah.
So yeah, we, you know, red gums teach us that the Australian landscape and, you know, river red gums, literally, they're that lifeblood, that vein network across almost the whole continent. They're not in the Kimberley.
Deep
There's some
roots.
patches in the Northern Territory that they're not, but it and its relatives. So there's some very closely related red gums in WA, all the way across, all up the Darling, the Diamantina, all of those other rivers, all the way up into the Cape. So yeah, these trees tell us long, slow systems. And yeah, like I was shown in my botany degree, a little red gum tree that was like this big. We went on a field trip to see it, and our lecturer Bob said, "How old do you think this is?" And you're like going, "Oh, it's only twice my thumb. Oh, maybe it's 10 years." He's like, "No, there were some photos, and we worked out that this tree was from a restoration event just after the Second World War, so like in 1880, 1890, and that little stick was in a paddock, was being grazed. It never quite died because there was another red gum that it was near, but basically it had never had the opportunity to really become a big tree and grow. And it was just sitting there, just chipping away, just surviving. And if the circumstances changed, maybe over a couple of thousand years it would become one of those big, huge red gums."
So when we see those big, huge red gums,
yeah, they can literally be a couple of thousand years old.
wow.
But it's all circumstances. Like if it's,
Yeah.
you know, in good years you grow faster, you get bigger faster, you put on that boom.
Because there's a few of those big old ones in Yorta country by the Murray there.
Yeah.
So I wonder.
Yeah, you really do wonder. I always get distressed when they're cutting any trees down. But some of the red gums, they say, "Oh, you know, this one's only 300 years old, or this one's only 500 years old."
Because they're quite big.
And yeah, they can be quite big.
Like their root systems are like, remind me of elephants, you know?
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah, just elephant trunks and legs and just that
Yeah.
with the earth, you know?
Yeah, they're huge.
And that's that listening, like it's almost like if you rest up against, for me, if I rest up by one of those trees, if I rest up against it, you can hear so many stories.
Yeah,
You know,
and
it's
that's
like plugging straight into a way better version than Netflix. It's just, you can hear so many stories throughout time that this tree is still holding in its root systems and connection to country.
Yeah, and they've survived all of those good times and bad times. If there's a living tree there, it's big, it's survived a long time. And even trees that can be little can have survived a long time. I mean, we sometimes do it, the Japanese do it with their bonsai plants, these perfect little miniature trees that look like they're probably not very old, but some of them have been passed down through the generations. And that's humans kind of holding them in that stasis, but it happens in the environment all the time. You just don't have maybe the right fungi on your roots. Maybe you just never get enough water. Maybe you are too close to another tree, and maybe she's sharing some sugar with you, but maybe she's not.
Say that to someone, you haven't got the right fungi on your roots, mate.
Yeah, you're not looking good. You need a bit more diversity on your feet.
Many people. Yeah.
More connections. We do better with a bit more connections to help us.
What if, I'm just thinking now about, through your way of knowing and understanding, and with the amount of heat that came through with the fires, what do you think, like, about those landscapes now?
Well, the catastrophe that those fires showed us was possible. Like, our learning with fire is terrifyingly getting bigger and bigger and hotter and hotter. So again, that lifeblood, the riparian, the wet systems, they are the rainforest systems. There's a lot of rainforest species that live in creeks and rivers and streams, and that's because they were the refuges. They used to be damp, they were wet, they were the parts of the landscape that lots of species could kind of, the wetter preferring ones. So as Australia dried out, lots of species kind of retreated. And this time in those fires, rainforest and riparian burnt. And it's one of the reasons the animal kills were huge, was because all of those little reservoirs and wet patches, if animals were lucky enough to be close to, they would retreat to them, and they burnt. There was no place of safety. And so we have not seen that large scale, the whole network burning, all of it burning for vast areas. So any patches that remained unburnt, and some of those patches in East Gippsland, unfortunately some of the Alps fires a couple of years before had come down and burnt them. So they've been turned 3 times in the last decade, which for that kind of forest system, that's not what we now know for those vegetation types. Basically those tall eucalypt forests,
excuse me,
you know, hung around for a few hundred years, and then the rainforest elements got bigger and bigger, and you had larger areas of forests that had been long unburned. But now we've burnt so much so often, the climate is shifting, and how, you know, so yeah, anything that survived is super precious. It's an ark for fungi and all of those microbes and things we don't even know we need, but the system needs them.
Yeah.
And so yeah, anything that survived is even more precious than it already was. And those systems, we will see, hopefully the patches that didn't burn 2 and 3 times in the last decade, hopefully their seed banks didn't burn, their soil banks survived enough that there are some fabulous, you know, reassuring photos of those landscapes re-greening. But we just hopefully keep the fire out so that they don't burn too often, because that's some of the learning we now do, is these big, huge fires. If you burn too often, it's like you got lots of young flammable systems. We've basically made generations of really young forest systems, and that's the danger point where they burn more. So we're not protecting our young forests from being burnt. We've shifted the climate so that it burns more. We've managed it by cutting it up in patches that makes it drier. And, you know, everything we seem to be doing is making it worse.
Yeah.
So somehow we've got to hold onto those forests for the couple of 100 years and let them shift back to more damp, moist system, have some rainforest plants and fungi and other organisms start to come in and do that different shift of recycling.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we should be driven by forestry, we need all these trees for something, paper or furniture or whatever. These ecosystems are inherently beautiful and wonderful, and they should just be there. And yeah, we use land and do systems, but we shouldn't be doing it everywhere.
Yeah.
We need to pull back our resource use so that, we can have hyper-managed little patches which are hyper-productive, and then let the rest get on with its job being what it is.
That would mean we all have to change our ways.
Yeah.
And be less consumptive, and respect what we use much more than we do.
Yeah.
So we would use less. I'm also interested to know, throughout your years of working the way you do with land and being species, have you engaged much with First Peoples and worked alongside those knowledge systems as well? Because you're speaking to me in the way I'm listening, you're saying exactly the same anyway, but I'm wondering if you've walked alongside Indigenous mobs in gaining awareness or sharing knowledge or just listening.
Yeah, well, I was incredibly lucky as a child. I started out as a child in Africa, and I still find non-white places much more relaxing. I find all of, particularly in Australia, the visual humanities quite exhausting. I feel safer when there's darker people around me, and I think that's from my childhood of being, little white baby in quite a mixed community and Zambia has lots of different tribes, so there are lots of different peoples. And I was lucky my family all spoke different languages for the different things. So I originally spoke 3 languages as a kid, and my parents couldn't even understand me because they only spoke English and one of the languages, and my grandparents could understand me because they both spoke 5 to 10 bits of languages themselves. So yeah, my language brain, when I go to Africa, and I did as an adult, I did start learning some of the local languages. They said, oh, you're quick, you hear where the words begin and end. And I was like, yeah, no, it makes sense.
It's in there from your
that
years,
those first 3.5 years. And then I was even luckier as a young child to a sort of early teenager. We were in the mining area, so we're in mining town country, and my parents again communicated with lots of different people, and so we got involved with the Jigalong mob, and so I get to go out that way and Pitjantjatjara country and lots of different places. There's quite a few tribes that all intersect in that area, and as a kid you didn't really learn what they were necessarily, but we got to play, and playing with kids who have amazing observational skills. Like they almost seem like magical children. What they could see, the detail in the rocks or the soil or the plant, or we were fishing or we were making a paper bark canoe or whatever we were doing. They just, their skills just astounded me. And I think, you know, the little bit of competition, it's like, I want to be that good. I want to be able to see what they can see, you know. And so, yeah, I treasure that natural history induction. And yeah, you know, both Africa and Australian peoples tend to have a level of kids being respectful and listening. And so, yeah, maybe I've got some listening skills there somewhere, not just loud and bossy.
Yeah, not just.
So yeah, I'm very grateful to those childhood experiences, and yeah, I've ended up, I do interact with Indigenous peoples if I can and try and be respectful, but we're in such a crazy world. It's easy to get isolated and super scientific or super professional, or you know. So yeah, particularly in the cities, I don't think there's that much engagement, but I love it when I go to places like Broome and just relax, and people are themselves, and yeah, if you listen, you hear local stories and you'll connect with people.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't be a tourist and just sort of turn up for 2 days and expect to have some sort of experience. You've got to commit to being in a place for a bit, I think. And
and build those relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you feel personally would be the gift Indigenous First Peoples, Aboriginal peoples could offer scientists?
Oh, well, you've got just such awesome brains and cultures and way of thinking that you've got a different lens, and those stories that hopefully you've still got from your connection bits of land, like that's observation. Like science in its, you know, in a purest form is observation and experience and understanding those connections. And with, you know, tens of thousands of years of experience, even if you can't see things, seeing healthy systems and unhealthy systems and systems that push one way or the other, those observational skills and those stories, they're real, you know, it's anecdotal evidence. You have seen this in its place doing its thing. That's super valuable, and it's one of the things we have lost in parts of Australia where there's been more cultural annihilation and loss of First Peoples, and means that we don't have that information, we don't have that access. And so yeah, I think, like I know a couple of lovely young scientific First Peoples scientists, and they're not, you know, Jigalong was a mission. Like, so there was that whole history of making you a proper white person and you know, educating you and, you know, making you better. But now it's glorious to see the young generation saying, I don't have to choose. I don't have to be this white shadow of myself or be where I was and not change. There are some great people who are doing both, and it's the analogy I like to use is, some of those European scientists that some of us want to mimic, they were often musicians and scientists. The maths and the science was often connected by music. And I think with the Indigenous people, that musical brain, observational skills is actually just giving a whole extra depth to their science. And so if they can learn these systems and then adapt them with their abilities, how much more powerful will that be? And that will to restore, the responsibility of making our survival and all the species survival better than when we got here. Like that is also, a gift to actually want to be able to do that.
Custodianship is a gift.
It is, it absolutely is. You look after it and it will look after you. And that's true. It's one of the reasons that, I've ended up in conservation scientist, because we need to look after what we've got and we need to let natural systems fix them up as much as we can and then let them do what they do. Because, we've made such a mess.
So some people might feel somewhat overwhelmed by not knowing where to start, or also they just have never been introduced to the natural world throughout their entire life. There's some people that exist like that. And so it's really not even a part of their reality check. It's not there, at least not at the forefront, What would you offer as a first step? An achievable thing, an achievable goal for all people, considering the staggered event of life and where we're all at individually in our awarenesses and knowledge bases.
Yeah, I think kids have got it right. If you give kids a puddle of water and the mud in the puddle or a few leaves or whatever, they will play. They will explore, the little scientists in them, the reflection of light, the squish of the mud, they will play. And they will delight in the simplest things, the simplest, glorious little things. And look, my niece is 8 months old, and I'm her crazy auntie that goes for walks, and I take bits of plants from her urban environment and I just give her bits of plants. And I gave her a passion flower a couple of weeks ago, and she would play with these bits and look at them and sniff them and stick them in her mouth, so I was always careful not to give her anything toxic. But this passion flower, she explored and ended up with passion flower pollen all over herself. I had to apologise to my sister-in-law, say, sorry, a bit of pollen on the clothes. But that tactile 8-month-old baby played with a single flower for the entire walk home from daycare. And she squished it and she smushed it and passion flowers are incredibly complicated botanically. And I think that's usually she didn't play that long, and maybe I'd given her really simple bits of plant before. I've given her an acacia leaf or a eucalypt leaf, and if I knew what it was, I'd tell her what it was, and maybe she learns and maybe she doesn't. But that immersion, that experience of that flower, she, maybe later in life will have some response to passion flowers. I don't know, but that play, the full immersion, just let yourself delight and explore and play with what you connect with. If it's a patch of sunlight, a patch of water, a tree you like the form of, a cloud that's kind of cool. It's allowing ourselves that space and time to not worry about the list or all the things we're trying to do or what we want to do or what we should have said, or all of that. When you play in nature, and I still play, I come here and I go, oh, it's all overwhelming, and I have a cup of tea and I find myself either weeding or I found a dead owl sadly here one time, and I wander around and this place talks to me. And I can lose, you know, I mean, I'll just go for a walk and go up to the old wise trees and sometimes I'm gone 2 or 3 hours. And it's like, when I get home, I'm like, oops, what was I meant to be doing? But in this space, you know, this is one of the spaces I come to play and chill out and just cuddle around, see what's here, see what's not here. So, yeah, it grounds me, trees me.
Trees you, grounds you, airs you.
Yeah. But so that busy brain problem doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I come here. I like give myself permission to just chill a bit,
Yeah.
play a bit,
Yeah.
just experience it. So we are all connected to different things. We're all attracted to different things. But I promise if you start just focusing on and delighting in some of those things.
In the natural world.
In the natural world. But yeah, the natural world is everywhere. There is sunlight and there is moisture and hopefully there is plants, which, you know, I can't do without of.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you know, an ant or whatever. Like, hopefully we haven't succeeded in making everything perfectly sterile in some places.
Yeah. And it'll quench your thirst. Beautiful.
Yeah.
This is a lovely little spot with your lovely friends here.
Yeah.
A little family group here, growing
Yeah.
together. Magic. Thanks for sharing.
No worries. Thanks for listening.
Easy, easy. And thank you everyone else for listening.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yay.